Thanks again for joining us this afternoon. My name is Geoffrey Edwards from Clarity Mountain Education, and we're here today for our webinar, Navigating the AI Policy Minefield, focused on protecting academic integrity for modern K-12 learners. We just want to kind of set the table a little bit, make sure that we're all on the same page, and kind of debunk some of the common misconceptions around AI in education with our first section here, the AI reality check. So I want to start off just by saying that no matter how you feel about AI, some people are early adopters who really love it. Some people are kind of a little hesitant, but looking to dive in, and others are kind of diametrically opposed to this new technological development. No matter where you stand, I think we can all agree that the AI bell cannot be unrung. And the spring of 2026 really felt like to me like it was a turning point when it comes to AI, especially in the education world, but more broadly. If you look at the higher education world, we had a lot of backlash at commencement, about commencement speakers and commencement addresses. We also saw the new Pope with his first encyclical focusing on the role of AI and the limitations that we should be placing on it as we move into the future to really maintain a level of humanity around technology and the way that we interact with it. And you also are starting to see more and more schools dealing with controversy, backlash, and even lawsuits around accusations of cheating with AI. And, I think, again, we're going to have to grapple with these issues. But my real standpoint here is that strict no AI policies at any level of education really fail to prepare students for the looming reality that they're facing. And I think a lot of the anxiety we see from students at the higher education level, they're thinking about graduating into a workforce that is experiencing a lot of downsizing because of the development of AI. And at other levels, we see anxiety around kind of a lack of confidence in how they are expected to interact with these tools and to use or not use these tools through their education. And so we're going to dive into some of these issues today, as well as talk a little bit about pedagogy around AI, both in terms of how we're dealing with AI when it comes to assessment, but also how to integrate it in really meaningful and positive ways into the classroom. So I think first, we really just want to start by saying that LLMs, large language models, and AI in general, it's not kind of a repository of knowledge. It is really a statistical model. And so large language models aren't, Shakespeare. They were trained on Shakespeare. They are trying to look at the content that they were trained on to predict the next best word in order to build out a piece of text. And we really need to just remember that they're focusing on patterns, not knowledge, and that because of that, hallucinations, incorrect information, it's inevitable that this is going to happen. The one thing that I will say is that I do believe that a lot of AI models are getting better as they are more well connected to kind of evolving and contemporary information on the broader internet. But at the same time, it's going to pull from outdated information. It's going to have strange wording sometimes. And these kinds of things are really inevitable. And part of what we want to do in looking at AI in secondary education is looking at how we can train some of this AI literacy and educate our students about how these things work, how AI models work, and what the best way to use them is to get the best results and to avoid those kinds of hallucinations, incorrect information, or other biases coming out in their outputs. There are a few kind of impending threats that I see at the secondary education level. And the first of those is, I think, accidental violations. And this is one of the key things that we're going to talk about is how we structure Word, our AI academic integrity policies, and how we interact with students in the classroom when it comes to those policies. And when our policies are unclear or incomplete, we're going to see students utilizing tools that we intended to be off limits, that they did not interpret those rules to be off limits. And this is beyond students who are really using, AI and large language models to actively try and cheat in a course, and really looking at those students who want to use it where it's allowed, but don't want to cheat, but they still might accidentally have violations of those policies. We're also going to see shadow usage, and this is more for those students who aren't really sure if it's in bounds or not, or they know it's not allowed and they want to do it anyway. The less we engage and the less that we're clear and have that conversation with students, the less they're going to engage with us in return. And that's going to lead to that shadow usage, that secretive usage of AI in classroom assignments and in other ways. So, and the last one I think is kind of speaking to the AI literacy piece, and that is really that where we don't want to be graduating students that are unprepared for what is going to be expected of them in the real world or in higher education. And it's really my strong belief that complete AI bans risk graduating students that are not prepared to navigate the real world demands, and they're not prepared with the AI literacy skills needed to be successful in an AI integrated workforce. Now, I want to start kind of breaking down what I think a lot of educators have started to rely on when it comes to determining and assessing whether or not a student has used AI, and that is what I call the myth of the AI detector. Commercial AI detection platforms have started to be evaluated on their accuracy and efficacy and really are falling down on the job. There's high false positive rates, they're easy to bypass, and we see distinct biases, especially against English as a second language, English language learning students who might be utilizing more structured writing styles in order to ensure that they are meeting the requirements of an assignment or a class, but those structured writing styles are often flagged more often as AI. And there's a real vulnerability here, right? That structured writing is really not just with English language learning students, but a lot of students who are striving to follow a rubric very closely, who are really trying to go through and be diligent and check all their boxes, also might tend towards a more formulaic writing style, especially on kind of analytical or other kind of essays. And we don't want to penalize that, right? And so AI detectors are going to often flag that kind of structured uniformity as AI, even if it's not. And really, what I would say is that the uh, the thing that I would encourage you to do is to, if your school encourages you to use AI detection software, use it, but never rely on it as the sole arbiter of whether or not something is AI. And as we get going here, getting some questions in the chat. Feel free to drop them into the chat either directly to me or to everyone, and we'll work through those questions as we get going. I got a great question here about comparing and contrasting the AI bans versus phone bans. And I think there's a really interesting article that I just posted on LinkedIn, I believe yesterday or the day before, that dives into this issue, and we can talk about that in a few moments. So, just to kind of summarize the AI detection issues that we see high false positive rates, we see linguistic biases. We see how they're easily bypassed either through simple human editing of an AI output or through prompting that can change the writing styles in a way that will come out more natural. There's even been cases that I've read about where students will input their own natural writing into an AI chatbot to have it mimic that writing style, that tone, and that vocabulary in its output. And so there's a lot of ways that students can bypass these detection softwares very easily. The most important piece that I would kind of want to put a pin in around why we should move away from relying on AI detection as a core element of how we assess student work is that it creates a culture of suspicion. It creates an adversarial environment rather than fostering a pedagogical conversation and an environment of support with our students. And I really believe that that is where we need to move, especially as AI becomes more and more prevalent and more commonly used by our students. So, when it comes to the next section, we're going to dive into a little bit the kind of spectrum of policy around AI with a strong focus on academic integrity, but also focusing on kind of other policy issues that teachers and schools should be considering as they are utilizing AI in the classroom and assessing student work, either with allowed AI usage or where AI usage has been prohibited. And we'll talk a little bit about more pedagogically sound ways to move forward with that assessment of student work. So I want to kind of just start by looking at what is really a pretty boilerplate policy when it comes to AI and academic integrity and kind of deconstruct this policy a little bit. So, this policy here we have on the screen: use of unauthorized technology, including artificial intelligence or automated writing assistance, is strictly prohibited in this course. And so, we need to think about what do we intend versus what are students interpreting when we are writing policies around AI or academic integrity more broadly. The college that I went to many years ago now had an honor code and academic integrity code that we had to write on every single assignment. And it was very vague and broad and doesn't actually communicate to students where the lines are drawn. And it was just, I've had no unauthorized help on this assignment, and you sign your name, right? What is unauthorized help? When we look at automated writing assistance, that part of this policy, you probably intend that to exclude things like generative AI, large language models, but in many cases also tools like Grammarly. But Word spell check is also an automated writing assistant when we really boil it down. Is that included or excluded in this category? Is that permitted or not? Spelling check, grammar check, right? Can you use an AI chatbot essentially as a thesaurus? Can you look up a word in Google for synonyms or for things like that when it's giving you the AI mode summary of all of the results that they get? So we really want to drive for clarity. And as I mentioned, what constitutes authorized and unauthorized? Is using AI as a virtual tutor acceptable in this course? Or is that also out of bounds if you're not using it for submitted work? Could students use Notebook LM to create study tools from their own class notes, like an audio overview? We have to think also about the needs of neurodivergent students, students with auditory processing disorders, other learning disabilities, and issues like dyslexia. When it comes to what are we banning in a course and how are we being clear about that? So, what I would encourage everyone to think about and move towards is to have something along the lines of a kind of segmented policy where you, like this traffic light framework, where you have some that are full prohibition, in this case, red, right? And this is where we want to be assessing really foundational skills for things like algebra, for maybe creative writing, English literature, literary analysis. Yellow might be where we can have a little bit of AI integrated or used on an assignment for things that you permit, but you need to be specific about what uses and what types of tools are permitted. It might be brainstorming or outlining or getting feedback on work that is a permitted use of AI in your yellow category. And then lastly, looking at where we're trying to teach AI literacy skills, we have the green or fully integrated category of the framework. And this is for kind of projects that are maybe simulating a professional AI workflow or really trying to use AI as a tool to teach about AI, to gather those AI literacy skills for students. And the key here is that I think using some sort of framework like this, either in your school, in your class, where different teachers, different classes, or different assignments can have a different baseline rule set around AI usage is really valuable to allow that flexibility to restrict it in some cases, teach AI literacy skills in other cases, while being very clear and upfront with students, and also driving that conversation about what's in bounds, what's out of bounds, can I use this tool? Those kinds of issues. And again, we're really driving towards clarity and engagement as the two key things that we want to establish when it comes to academic integrity rules around AI. We want to offer students clear boundaries, what's permitted and what is not permitted. We want to invite students via clear communication to engage in discussion about AI tools, how they can use them, and what the learning objectives are for a given class or assignment, and how that rule around AI usage is kind of interwoven with those learning objectives. If we really want the cognitive work and the creative struggle to be part of what we're assessing, we're going for a red category, no AI. If we want AI literacy skills to be part of what we're teaching, we'll go for green with integrated. You want to limit blanket bans across the board. Now, I think most courses will have some assignments or non graded coursework where AI will not impede desired learning. And even if you want your whole course, your whole class to be completely no AI, you might still want to make exceptions for things like creating study tools from student notes or using AI tools to read aloud for students who might have dyslexia or ADHD. And always looking for the appropriate places in your course where you can integrate AI into the assignments, into the classwork, so that you are ensuring that your students are leaving your classroom and your school prepared for that real world application of AI in that real world context. So I'm going to go through some of these again, kind of other vague AI policies with potential misinterpretations among students. The automated writing assistants we already covered. Is Grammarly, or where's that line drawn? Is it Grammarly? Is it spell check? Is it grammar check? Is it, no generation, but feedback is okay? Where are you drawing your line for students? And then we see another one. Artificial intelligence is strictly prohibited. Does this include AI mode in Google search? Does this include producing those study tools? Does this include what are we saying with this? And the last one, violations result in a zero. What if they have one of those accidental violations that we've discussed? Is there a warning? Is there a discussion? Is there a chance to redo an assignment maybe once for the first violation? And so we have some clear rewritten versions of these policies. And now let me tell you, introducing more clarity to your policies around AI and academic integrity is by its very nature going to make your policies longer. That is just the way it's going to be. But providing that clarity to students and providing that starting point for further conversation with students is, I think, really important for that pedagogical approach to academic integrity. So we rewrote the first one here. The use of automated writing assistants is prohibited. And the replacement is use of AI or writing assistants to generate, rewrite, paraphrase, or substantially edit content is prohibited. However, the use of basic spelling and grammar checking tools that do not alter the meaning or generate new content is permitted. And this is a really great example of that. What's in bounds, what's out of bounds, very clear. What can you use and what can you use it for? What can't you use and what can't you use it for? And so This is a great model of how to enhance that clarity in academic integrity policies around AI and really draw those lines very clearly for students. Now, you might be someone who's generally opposed to AI in education, and I think that that's a perfectly acceptable point of view. If you are the person that says artificial intelligence is strictly prohibited, you might be a little bit clearer about it to remove any doubt about what exactly this means by saying something like AI for any purpose at any time in the learning experience, including spell check, grammar correction, and learning aid study tools, is never allowed in this course. If that's where you want to be with it, maybe you're an art teacher and you really don't want any students using AI for anything in your course because you want to see their creativity, you want to see their technique, you want to see their analysis and interpretation of art. That's a valid point of view. And then when it comes to violations, results in a zero. We might say something like students that violate the AI policies in this course will be given the opportunity to redo their assignment after the first violation if they first meet with the teacher to clarify their understanding of AI policies. But subsequent violations will result in a zero. So just trying to throw this out there. You know, your AI policies are going to be tailored to your school, your students, your subject, and your personal views on what the role of these tools should be in the classroom. But no matter where you stand on the topic, we want to be clear and we want to engage with students about this issue and about what is the expectation on a given assignment or in a given class. When it comes to evaluating student work, the real big thing that I would say is if you're using AI detection software, if that is part of the workflow in for you as a teacher or that's expected at your school, please do me the favor and we want to pivot from accusation to inquiry. We don't want to just go right to it and say, your paper was flagged as AI. It was a 72% that this was written with AI. Keep that keep that score, keep it in your back pocket. Hold on to it maybe, but don't go straight to it. You might say something more like, Danielle, I noticed a massive jump in analytical depth here. Can you walk me through your research process? Or how did you arrive at the conclusion you made in section 3? And I would love it if you have any thoughts on this, type them in the chat. We're going to keep rolling to make sure that we stay on time, but we'll definitely get back to the chat and see what y'all have to say about how you approach these conversations with students. To dive into that kind of authenticity check in with the student a little bit deeper, we really want to focus on a few areas that we're assessing. And this is mostly about written work, that we might be checking for AI generated writing, but we can use similar ideas with any type of work that we might suspect a student used AI to produce against policy. And we want to focus on agency. Can the student defend the thesis? Can they explain the argument made in the paper? Is this really something that came out of their mind? Or is it something that they read once, copy and pasted, and turned in, right? We want to look at iteration. If after that first level we still have some doubts, we might ask a student if they can share the file history with us. You know, we can see in Word, in most word processing programs, we can see the drafting history. So, can we rewind that clock and see how they developed, how they changed what they came up with on an assignment? And I think lastly, vocabulary, right? If the vocabulary is really through the roof, it might mean that they, used generative AI, large language models to produce that work. Or it might mean they fell in love with words and got a thesaurus for their birthday. And, we want to probe that and see, can they use these words? Do they understand these words? And when they're explaining the thesis, are they using similar vocabulary or are they kind of simplifying things when it comes to the jargon that they're using? So I want to address the issue of AI bans and phone bans. And I think phone bans and AI bans are not necessarily the same thing. Most schools do have either school provided devices or devices available for students to use. And we'll talk in this next section a little bit about how you can use kind of prompting out loud on a teacher device to develop those AI literacy skills, to model proper usage of AI in the classroom. But it's not necessarily that, if our school bans phones in the classroom, that means we can't use AI. And I also think that schools are going in a lot of different directions when it comes to AI. I mean, a school in upstate New York just announced that they are, for their computer science and engineering courses, going to have a robotic AI enabled teacher assistant in the classroom. And at kind of first blush, it sounds insane. But then when you learn that it's for engineering and robotics and computer science courses only, and that it's a locally hosted model, it becomes a little bit less crazy sounding. And so we're going to dive into some of those issues as well in this next section. So we want to understand kind of the baseline developmental science behind why AI is so appealing to teens. And I mean, first off, it saves time, it saves effort, but it's not just that they're using it in class on assignments. There's a recent study that was done that talks about a huge number, I think it was like 60 something percent of students surveyed use AI to solve social problems in their life. They go to AI and ask AI, how should I deal with this? What should I text back? Those kinds of things. And teens are highly social, but that prefrontal cortex that's responsible for impulse control and real critical thinking about risk is really one of the last parts of the brain to develop. And that's why from time to time you'll hear scientists and politicians talking about we should actually move the drinking age back to 25 instead of 21 because that's when the brain fully develops. But this lack of development in the prefrontal cortex really leads many teens to both rely on, because they are highly social and chatbots are very social and agreeable. And yeah, that's a great idea. You're so right. It drives them to rely on those chatbots without properly assessing the risk, both of violating AI policies, but also the risk potentially to their mental health. That same study of students engaging with AI in their social life also found that students who engage with AI more often for social questions, social problem solving, and socialization actually report higher levels of loneliness than those that engage with AI less. And so the mental health risk is also there, and something that, we can't control what students are doing outside of our classroom, but we can help educate our students about the risks. We can talk to our students about the risks, both again for academic integrity, but also the other risks of AI that are emerging as this technology develops. So, how we use AI in general, but especially in the classroom, plays an important role in how we learn. And we want to focus on there's two categories here. We have cognitive offloading versus cognitive outsourcing. And right off the bat, I'm going to tell you, we want to focus on instances where we can use AI for cognitive offloading rather than cognitive outsourcing. Uh, Cognitive offloading really refers to the use of AI that's seen as beneficial because it uses AI to remove tasks that consume our time and cognition, but that are not central to learning, to processing, to understanding key information. With cognitive offloading, we're allowing students to free up some of their working memory for higher order thinking. And that's the way that we want to be thinking about this is when we're using AI on assignments in the classroom, we want to really be focused on AI literacy skills and instances of cognitive offloading rather than cognitive outsourcing. And some examples of offloading include using AI to not find the sources, but to format a bibliography that they might be doing for a paper or another assignment. In my opinion, it is no longer vital that students memorize MLA or APA format citations when there are myriad tools out there that will do it for them. But they should know where to find the proper citation format to ensure and to double check that the AI did it correctly and to correct anything that it might have done incorrectly. I also think using AI tools for asking for feedback from a certain perspective, playing a certain role, the AI chatbot providing feedback on writing can actually be a way to deepen a student's thinking about a topic by asking the AI chatbot to kind of critically analyze, poke holes in an argument, or to provide feedback on the writing itself in ways where students can think about it themselves and then adjust their assignment from that point without having the AI generate any content. Or this is a great one, and my wife actually is she is a language enthusiast, and I heard about this before. I had never tried it myself, but she has been doing this recently in brushing up on some of her language skills, using AI as a conversation partner for language learning. You know, we speak both English and Spanish in my household. My wife was trying to brush up on her Portuguese skills prior to going on a trip to Brazil, and she had Gemini act as her conversation partner, uh, speaking in Portuguese with her because we don't have any friends where we live who speak Portuguese. And that might be the case for your students. If you're in certain parts of the US, there's not going to be a lot of German or Spanish or French speakers for students to practice with who are going to have a higher level of fluency than them. And using AI as that conversation partner can really help them develop that fluency and to get that practice speaking without anxiety of embarrassment. Also, AI is not going to, as we saw earlier, it's usually not very critical of you, so it's probably not going to criticize or do much more than just correct your language skills. When it comes to cognitive outsourcing, as we said, this is negative because it is really putting the thinking, putting that cognitive labor over onto the AI and abdicating that cognitive processing, analysis, developing of opinions, and it's really shortchanging students' ability to learn long term, as well as often fostering a false sense of fluency. As we talked about with how to assess student work, a lot of times students will think, "Oh, I read the Chat GPT output. Now I know everything there is to know about this." But they don't actually have that fluency with the topic, with the content, because it hasn't been ingrained through that productive struggle. And this might be example of this might be things like asking AI to outline or completely write an essay, getting AI to provide answers on math equations, or asking an AI chatbot for an opinion or analysis of a topic. Now, one of the things that I see, more and more is schools and students on their own turning to AI as a tutor to get that extra help. And it's really important, again, to ensure that we are not putting all of that thought process, putting all of that cognitive labor over onto the AI, that we're careful about how AI is tutoring students. A 2025 study of math students in Turkey found that students with unlimited access to ChatGPT while studying experienced a 17% drop in their scores and fluency when they were tested on the same content without AI assistance. Now, the students that studied on their own did not see the same drop off in their level of fluency and their scoring on the math questions. And students that had a Socratic AI tutor saw the exact same results as those that had no AI access at all. And so we want to focus on AI tutoring that follows the Socratic method. And we should be looking at ways that we can restrict or instruct AI chatbots and other programs to use that Socratic method to help students follow the path to the correct answer and never provide the answer outright. Because those if it is providing that answer outright, we're doing that cognitive outsourcing. We're not doing that productive struggle. We're not having that cognitive labor, and student learning is going to regress, as we saw from that study in Turkey, and it's going to prevent them from developing that higher level thinking. Whereas, again, the cognitive offloading and the Socratic tutoring both support student thinking and helping either free up space for higher level thinking or help students drive towards the correct answer via the Socratic method. Now, this is where we get back to kind of like how do we integrate AI into our coursework, into our classroom environment in ways that are pedagogical and, again, dealing with these issues of phone bans versus AI bans. How do we kind of navigate those things? If your school has a phone ban, again, find tablets or laptops. Uh, use your own computer to prompt aloud, right? Iterative prompting so that students prompt aloud, see the result, try again with a different prompt. Change the parameters, change how the question is phrased, put limitations on what you're asking for in the output, and see how those results compare. You're going to both find ways of gathering information and learning new skills in a really productive way. And you're also going to have students understand those AI literacy skills and how prompting can really drastically change what you're getting back from an AI chatbot. You can provide a prompt, maybe you come up with a prompt and you ask students to improve on it. And you, again, iterate and see how those results change. You might also look at, especially if we're trying to teach AI literacy skills, kind of break the AI, coming up with prompts that are going to drive towards hallucinations in the results. Whenever we're using AI, whenever we're talking about those policies around AI, again, we want to define the rules clearly, define what must be cited and how. And one of the things, again, we talk back about the bibliography as an example of cognitive offloading. One thing that they might be citing is how they used AI on an assignment. And I think talking about how to cite AI, what you expect to see, and if you want them to, requesting them to show their work when it comes to their AI usage on an assignment can be really valuable. And this might be including the prompt that you use to gather certain information. It might be, saving the chat logs and including those in it as an appendix on an assignment. Whatever it is that you want to do with an assignment, I think asking students to show their work brings that kind of AI usage out of the shadows and helps you to understand the line between the student thinking, the student work, and where the AI stepped in. And as we mentioned earlier, modeling professional workflows when it comes to AI usage, you might ask students to vibe code an app that will help them to accomplish something. In addition to these webinars, I do a lot of work with adult learners who are considering going back to school. And I was able to vibe code an app that pulls data from ONET and the Bureau of Labor Statistics to create a roadmap for people who are considering going back to school. Really interesting things. You can do so many different things with it. You might also build a consulting report using AI, or at the very least, consider grading not just the product, but the process, right? To see how they're getting there, where they're using AI. Are they showing those strong AI literacy skills in their work? So, yeah, if you have any thoughts, if you've done some of this in the past, we'd love to hear in the chat where you have worked AI into your classroom already. Now, I'm going to share some of this content with you over the next few days via email. These are some other examples of ways that you might integrate AI into the classroom in ways that are focused on using AI as a sounding board or using AI as a tool in different ways, right? So, that Socratic partner, feeding AI your subheadings from a reading, and asking it to come up with questions that they might ask as they are doing the reading. Auditing sources, right? Asking AI to provide checklists to help students detect bias, context, and intent in historical texts, or to produce a study schedule. I think that's one of those kind of study tool applications. It's not even really in incorporating any of the classroom content, but feeding into it. My test is this date. I've got these topics to study. Make a plan for me on when I should be studying to, have the best understanding of this content when I get to the test day. So it's not just about the classroom, right? It's also thinking about what are the school-wide policies around AI and how are we safeguarding against cheating, against violations of academic integrity, but also for other risks that we see with AI, whether that's student privacy or mental health. So again, always applying Socratic methods. And I think prohibiting outlining in kind of a completely unmediated way is a valuable approach. Having that real world focus, hosting AI models locally. This is a big one. And I pointed this out with that school in upstate New York. They are hosting the AI models locally. And I think we need to be thinking about this in kind of two different ways. If students are typing into an AI chatbot, there are some privacy concerns with that, but quite a bit less than if they are integrating with an AI-enabled robot that has audio and visual capability. So, where are we drawing the line? And if we think that the risk of student privacy is too great, we might look at locally hosted AI models, and always having that clear and consistent policy. I think moving on from kind of the discussion about policy, we want to look at how you define your goals as you move into the next school year. We want to think about at the class level, do you want your class to be red, yellow, green, mixed? You want to communicate and explain why your policy is the way it is. You really should start looking at your academic integrity policies, your AI policy, if it is class specific that you come up with as a teacher, sooner rather than later, so that you can alter it, communicate it, and explain the pedagogical reasons behind it when school starts up again, and explaining the implications on assignments. Why are we doing red on this assignment but green on that assignment? We want to think about how important is AI literacy for this field, for this subject. For a computer science class that's focused on coding, AI literacy is going to be vital. For an art class or an English class, not as much, right? And we want to have that kind of tailored to the topic. And we want to be clear about where, when, and how students should be using AI. And again, modeling all of those pieces against what is going to be real world conditions for our students once they leave us. And always looking to try and minimize that cognitive outsourcing so that we maintain the productive struggle, we maintain human creativity, and we drive for original analysis. To revisit AI detection one more time before we close today, some of the things that we can do to mitigate AI is to pivot to classroom assignments. We talked about some of those examples, but you could also use the flipped classroom model, group projects, or ask students to teach a lesson. We can lean on oral defenses, which seems a little bit old school, but I think it's an interesting and valuable pivot to make, where we're asking students to defend orally submitted work, where we're doing oral examinations, where we're asking for students in math class to explain their process in getting towards a solution, or leaning on in-class presentations where Q&A is a big piece of the grading rubric. And again, focusing on process, not product, where we bring the drafting process into class, where we ask them upfront to submit a file with the version history enabled, where we utilize preliminary assignments to build towards a final product, or where we lean on things like hyperlocal and very recent prompts on assignments to make it a little bit more friction heavy when it comes to getting AI to complete the work for students. While access to the internet by AI chatbots has started to close the gap here, a lot of chatbots are still not great at the most current, the most local issues. Yes, and this is a great example. In our English department has leaned on colloquiums in connection to major student essays, like a senior thesis. And another school that serves as a model, St. Andrew's Private School in Delaware, they use Google Docs most of the time for out of class essays. Again, because you can share that file and see the version history there. Uh, so we've just got a few minutes left, and I will hang out for any questions that you all have. I would strongly encourage everyone. Again, August is coming up very soon. We're almost there. I would encourage you within the next week or two to take a look at your curriculum and your syllabus, remove any vague bands, try to replace it with specific language. Try to say, even if you can't name every single AI tool that a student might use for a certain function, but you could say, for example, X, for example, Y. What are students using? Thank you. I got a few people who are jumping off for another meeting. Thank you for coming. Giving examples of the tools that are inbounds and out of bounds, the uses, the kind of use cases that are inbounds and out of bounds is key. Before assignments, be clear about on this assignment, where do we stand if you're using the traffic light in that traffic light model? Restate if you do have a ban, or if you do have a ban on certain uses or certain tools, restate that before an assignment, explain why, and provide those details before an assignment. And I think the most important thing is, beginning of school, first few days of class, as you're talking about these issues with students, reassure them that this technology is a tool. We're going to talk about when and how you can use it, uh, but we're also going to talk about when and how you can't use it, and invite students to see this as a tool, not a trap, and to come to you with any use cases that they might want to explore that might not be detailed in your policies. So thanks everyone for joining. I'm Geoffrey Edwards from Clarity Mountain Education. We do have a few other upcoming webinars. I'm actually in the process of moving right now, so I haven't come up with dates for these yet, but these are all in the works. So keep an eye out and share these if you think someone might be interested. We're going to have a student and parent focused AI in education webinar called Avoiding the Pitfalls of AI, How to Understand Policies, Ask the Right Questions, and what to do before you're falsely accused of cheating. We're also going to be having another webinar, Empowering the Adult Learner in Higher Education, for higher education level folks, looking at how they can pivot to adult education as a way to conquer the enrollment cliff that they are facing. And lastly, we're going to be hosting another webinar in the next couple of months called Navigate Your Next Move for adults, maybe some of you who might be considering graduate level education, who are considering returning to the classroom, on how to navigate that path back into higher education after being out of school for a while. So that's our time for today. Thank you all for joining me. Really appreciate your contributions. And I will be following up by email with some takeaways within the next few days. So please keep an eye out for that. Thanks, everyone. Take care.